Barry Gibb's early life began in a modest working-class household where comfort was never guaranteed, but care and togetherness were always present. Money was often limited, and the family learned to live with simplicity, making the most of what they had. Yet what they lacked in material wealth, they made up for in emotional connection and shared resilience. His parents worked tirelessly, shaping a home where effort was valued more than luxury. In this environment, Barry learned early that life required patience and persistence rather than instant reward. Music did not enter his life as a career ambition, but as a natural part of daily living. It was present in conversations, in radio sounds, and in the small moments of family interaction. Even without formal training or structured opportunity, the seeds of creativity were quietly planted. These early surroundings gave Barry something lasting, a sense that expression could grow from ordinary life. Instead of being shaped by privilege, his outlook was formed by observation, listening, and adapting. That foundation would later become essential in everything he created, giving his work a grounded emotional quality that audiences could feel without needing explanation. Family strength and quiet emotional lessons. Within the Gibb household, strength was not expressed through grand gestures, but through steady daily effort. Barry grew up watching his parents manage responsibilities with calm determination, even when circumstances were not easy. This quiet resilience became one of his earliest emotional lessons. Family life encouraged closeness, where communication often happened naturally rather than formally. In that atmosphere, children learned to pay attention to feelings that were not always spoken aloud. Barry developed a sensitivity to mood and tone that would later influence his music. Even simple family routines carried meaning, teaching him that stability is often created through consistency rather than perfection. There were challenges, of course, but they were met with unity rather than separation. This sense of togetherness gave Barry an early understanding of support systems, where individuals lean on one another without needing to explain everything. These experiences shaped his emotional awareness, helping him recognize how deeply human connection influences expression. Long before he understood the technical side of music, he understood the emotional side of life, and that understanding became a quiet but powerful influence on his creative path. First encounters with sound and expression music entered Barry Gibb's life not as a formal introduction, but as a natural presence within his home. The environment he grew up in was filled with rhythm, conversation, and everyday sounds that gradually formed a foundation for his interest in music. His father's involvement with drumming introduced him to rhythm in its simplest and most instinctive form. These early exposures were not structured lessons, but lived experiences. Barry and his brothers began experimenting with sounds, often imitating what they heard around them, and blending their voices in playful ways. What started as casual imitation slowly became something more meaningful. They discovered that when their voices came together, something unique emerged, an emotional depth that felt larger than individual effort. These early moments were not about performance or ambition, but about curiosity and connection. Music became a shared language between siblings, a way of expressing feelings that were difficult to articulate otherwise. Without realizing it, they were building the foundation of a lifelong creative identity. The importance of this stage lies not in achievement, but in discovery, where sound became a natural extension of thought and emotion, sibling bond and shared musical identity. The relationship between Barry Gibb and his brothers played a central role in shaping his musical journey. Robin and Maurice were not just siblings, but creative companions, and together, they formed a connection that went beyond ordinary family ties. Their shared experiences allowed them to develop a natural understanding of harmony, where each voice found its place within the group. There was no formal instruction guiding them at first. Instead, they learned through listening and adjusting to one another. This process created a sense of unity that became the core of their early sound. They were not focused on success or recognition during these formative years. Instead, they were driven by enjoyment and curiosity, exploring how their voices could blend in ways that felt emotionally satisfying. This bond strengthened over time, becoming both a personal and artistic foundation. It taught Barry the importance of collaboration, where individual strength is enhanced rather than diminished by collective effort. The emotional trust between the brothers allowed them to experiment freely, and that freedom would later become a defining feature of their music. Early performances and growing confidence. As the Gibb brothers grew older, their informal musical experiments gradually evolved into small performances at local events. These early appearances were modest in scale, often taking place in community settings where audiences were casual and expectations were low. However, for Barry, these moments carried significant meaning. Each performance offered a chance to understand how music connects with listeners in real time. He learned how subtle changes in tone or timing could influence emotional response. These experiences also helped build confidence, not in a sudden way, but gradually through repetition and observation. The group began performing under early names, exploring different styles, and refining their harmony. While they were still far from professional recognition, there was already a sense of direction forming. Their sound stood out not because it was polished, but because it was sincere. This sincerity became one of their strongest qualities. Even in simple performances, they displayed an emotional maturity that surprised those who heard them. These early steps were essential, not because they brought fame, but because they built discipline, awareness, and a growing belief in their shared potential. A journey across distance and change. A major turning point in Barry Gibb's early life came when his family decided to relocate from the United Kingdom to Australia. This move was not easy or comfortable. It was driven by the hope of creating a more stable future. Leaving behind familiar surroundings required emotional adjustment, especially for young children. The journey itself represented both uncertainty and possibility. In Australia, the family had to rebuild their sense of routine while continuing to support the boys' interest in music. For Barry and his brothers, this period became a test of adaptability. They were introduced to new environments, new audiences, and new challenges that required flexibility. Performances often took place in informal settings, where they had to earn attention rather than expect it. Despite the difficulties, this phase strengthened their resilience. They learned that progress does not always follow a straight path, and that persistence is often more important than immediate success. This experience shaped Barry's understanding of change, teaching him that growth often comes from movement, adjustment, and the willingness to continue despite uncertainty. Developing a distinct harmonic sound. During their time in Australia, the Gibb brothers began to refine the musical identity that would eventually define their career. Barry, as the eldest, naturally took on a guiding role, helping to shape arrangements and structure their performances. Robin and Maurice contributed their own distinct vocal qualities, and together, they created a harmonic blend that felt both natural and emotionally expressive. What made their sound special was not technical complexity, but emotional balance. Each voice supported the others, creating a unified effect that felt larger than individual contribution. This approach developed organically through practice, rather than instruction. Over time, they began to recognize that their strength lay in harmony rather than separation. This realization influenced the way they approached music going forward. They were no longer simply performing songs. They were creating an identity through sound. This stage marked an important shift from experimentation to intention, where their music began to reflect a clearer artistic direction. The harmony they developed during this period would later become a defining feature of their global success. Return to the UK and rising recognition. When the Gibb family returned to the United Kingdom, their musical journey entered a new and transformative phase. The environment they entered was more competitive and professionally structured, offering both opportunity and pressure. It was during this time that their work began to attract attention from industry professionals, who recognized the emotional depth of their sound. Early songs such as Massachusetts and To Love Somebody helped establish their presence in the music world. These tracks resonated with audiences not only because of their melody, but because of their emotional sincerity. For Barry, this period represented a shift from local performer to international artist. However, with recognition came responsibility. Expectations increased, and the creative process became more demanding. Despite this, Barry remained deeply involved in songwriting, often drawing from personal emotion to shape his work. His ability to translate feeling into music became one of his defining strengths. This phase marked the beginning of sustained artistic influence, where their music reached a global audience and began to shape popular culture in lasting ways. Later years and quiet reflection. In his later years, Barry Gibb's relationship with music has taken on a more reflective tone. Rather than pursuing constant output, he has chosen a slower, more intentional approach to creativity. His focus has shifted toward honoring the work he has already created, while continuing to engage with music in meaningful ways. Performances today are less about ambition and more about connection, offering audiences a chance to revisit songs that have become part of cultural memory. This stage of life reflects a balance between legacy and presence. Barry's influence continues to be recognized across generations of musicians who draw inspiration from his harmonic style and emotional storytelling. While fame once defined much of his public identity, his later years suggest a return to simplicity and personal meaning. Music remains an important part of his life, but it is now approached with reflection rather than urgency. This shift highlights the natural evolution of an artist whose journey spans decades, showing how creativity can adapt while still remaining deeply connected to its original source. Legacy of harmony and human experience. Barry Gibb's legacy extends beyond commercial success or recognition. It lies in the emotional connection his music continues to create. His journey from a modest upbringing to global influence reflects the power of persistence, collaboration, and shared creativity. The harmonies he developed with his brothers became more than musical structure. They became expressions of lived experience. Across decades, his work has maintained a sense of emotional authenticity that resonates with listeners of different generations. What makes his story meaningful is not only achievement, but continuity, the ability to remain connected to the emotional roots of his early life. His music reflects themes of resilience, unity, and expression shaped by real human experience. Even today, his influence can be heard in artists who value emotional honesty in their work. His legacy serves as a reminder that creativity often grows from ordinary beginnings and that lasting art is built not only on talent, but on the depth of life lived and shared through sound.